In the realm of martial arts, there exists a profound discipline known as bending, where individuals possess the ability to manipulate the elements. This power fostered a delicate balance between the nations as fire, water, earth, and airbenders coexisted in harmony. However, this tranquility was shattered when the Fire Nation, driven by its insatiable ambition, launched a devastating assault on the other nations. Only the Avatar, the master of all four elements, could stop this tyranny. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. Thus commenced the century-long war, during which the Fire Nation spread its dominion far and wide, engulfing the world in darkness. Yet, just when hope seemed lost for eternity, a glimmer of light pierced through the abyss, granting the world a precious second chance at redemption. Two siblings, Sokka and Katara, come across a giant iceberg with a boy frozen inside of it. That boy is Aang, the protagonist of this show. Aang and his flying pet Appa are rescued by the siblings who take him to their village.
This is the entire village. Entire village, Aang.
There, Aang learns all the airbenders were wiped out of existence 100 years ago, making him the last remaining airbender.
Aang, how long were you in that iceberg?
I don't know, a few days maybe?
I think it was more like 100 years.
Katara is the only waterbender in the whole South Pole and has been in search of a mentor.
Finally found a bender to teach me.
Katara, try not to put all your hopes in this boy.
Aang's awakening lights up the sky, which attracts the attention of Prince Zuko and his uncle Iroh. Zuko is an exiled prince of the Fire Nation whose family has been in search of the Avatar for 4 generations. He needs to capture the Avatar to restore his honor and place in the family. Sadly, Aang is banished from the village after accidentally setting off a firework in an old Fire Nation ship.
There goes my one chance at becoming a waterbender.
Zuko is attracted by the fireworks and heads straight to the village where Sokka tries to fight him, and let's just say it doesn't go very well. However, Aang returns to the village after seeing Zuko's ship and hands himself over to ensure everyone's safety.
Don't worry, Katara. It'll be okay.
After he's captured, Sokka feels guilty for banishing Aang and wants to help him, but a canoe isn't gonna cut it, so they take Appa with them. Meanwhile, Aang escapes the guards using his airbending skills, but Zuko isn't gonna let him off easily. He gets knocked into the water, and that's where he awakens his Avatar state, and the rampage begins as he knocks out all of the firebenders. He exhausts himself with his newly awakened powers, but Appa and the company have arrived just in time for the rescue.
Why didn't you tell us you were the Avatar?
Because I never wanted to be.
Starting from waterbending, Aang now has to master all the 4 elements. So with his newly acquired friends, he embarks on a journey to find a mentor. The group takes a detour to Aang's hometown where he introduces them to the statue of his mentor, Gyatso, who taught him everything he knows about airbending. He opens the sanctuary gate only to find statues of all previous avatars arranged in a way they call the Avatar Cycle. You see, when an avatar dies, he is reborn into a sequential cycle of air, water, earth, and fire, and since the last avatar was a Fire Nation, the next one has to be an airbender. Also, until now, Aang thought his nation must have survived the war, but sadly, he finds Gyatso's body surrounded by dozens of firebenders. Enraged, he awakens his avatar spirit again, but this time the whole world of benders learns about his return.
Send word to the Fire Lord immediately. The Avatar has returned.
Aang also finds his pet Momo, and even though he is saddened to learn what happened to his people, he must continue his journey to save the world. On a side note, Commander Zhao of the Fire Nation learns the truth about the Avatar and decides to take matters into his own hands. Zuko challenges him to a duel to prove his worth and actually wins, granting him the right to continue his search for the Avatar. The gang stops by an island where they get abducted by the warriors of Kyoshi, who happen to be all women.
Wait a second, there's no way a bunch of girls took us down.
However, they're very hospitable once they learn that Aang is the Avatar. The word of his stay spreads to Zuko, who arrives in his ship and raids the island. Aang realizes that he brings harm everywhere he goes and leaves to drive Zuko out of Kyoshi, but not before using the sea monster Unagi to put out the fire in the village.
Thank you, Avatar.
Their next destination is a highly advanced civilization of the Earthbending Nation,
The Earth Kingdom city of Omashu.
where his friend Bumi resides. After a wild joyride, the three are taken to the king, who recognizes the Avatar and issues 3 deadly challenges in exchange for their freedom. The first 2 challenges are fairly easy, but the third one involves fighting the king himself, who at the surface looks fragile but in reality is the strongest earthbender in the whole country. After a tough battle, Aang manages to defeat him, but he has to answer one last question before he can free his friends.
What is my name?
I got it!
Yeah?
He's an earthbender, right? Rocky! You know, because of all the rocks.
We're gonna keep trying, but that is a good backup.
Aang reflects on the nature of the challenges and realizes that the king is the same person whom he came looking for, his friend Bumi from 100 years ago.
Oh, Aang, it's good to see you. You haven't changed a bit.
Before he continues his journey, Bumi reminds him that he must restore balance in the world, and he will have to master all 4 elements to defeat the Fire Lord Ozai. The gang sees a boy named Haru practicing earthbending and follows him to the village, only to learn that the Fire Nation has banned it ever since they took over. Haru practices earthbending in secrecy because everyone who showed resistance, including his father, got killed by the Fire Nation. Haru and Katara bond over losing their parents to the Fire Nation's dictatorship, and she motivates him to not give up hope. Faced with a critical situation, Haru uses his powers to save an old man's life, but the same man rats him out to the guards. Katara feels responsible and decides to get caught on purpose to rescue him. As it turns out, the earthbenders weren't killed. In fact, they were put to forced labor on a ship in the middle of the ocean. Having no access to earthly material has rendered them useless, but Katara is still determined to rally them for an escape. Eventually, she convinces them to fight for their freedom and rescues Haru and his father with the help of Aang. On a side note, Katara loses her mother's necklace on her way, which is now in possession of Zuko. Coming across a burnt forest, Aang feels saddened as it once homed hundreds of animals, but Katara gives him hope that it will grow back. The gang then follows an old man to his village, haunted by an evil spirit, Hei Bai, and the only person who can help them is the Avatar. Unfortunately, Aang doesn't know how to help them, but is willing to try as it is his duty. You see, the last Avatar, Roku, was supposed to teach this stuff to Aang, but since he is dead now, Aang has to learn it on his own.
Yeah, we're all gonna get eaten by a spirit monster.
His conventional method of talking it out with the spirit doesn't work so well, and the spirit runs off with Sokka while he is left stranded in the burnt forest. However, Aang manages to tap into the spirit world on his own, where he is greeted by the spirit of Roku's pet dragon. It flies him into a pagoda with Roku's statue inside, but he is only available to talk during the solstice hours. Aang can't wait that long and returns to the village in his real body to look for another way. Hei Bai attacks the village again at night, but this time, Aang learns that it is just a panda who has been angered ever since the forest was burned and manages to give him the same hope Katara gave him. Doing so calms the spirit, and it returns Sokka along with every person it had abducted so far. And also, Aang had a vision of a comet in the pagoda and wants to visit the island again during the solstice to ask Roku about it.
But the solstice is tomorrow.
Yeah, and there's one more problem. The island is in the Fire Nation.
On the other hand, Iroh is captured by the earthbending warriors for a siege he led a few years ago. He tries to escape them but fails until Zuko arrives and the two fend off the earthbenders. During his rescue mission, he notices Appa flying around the area and visits the nearby village to inquire about the Avatar. He really wants to follow him into the Fire Nation, but he should have listened to his uncle. The man's got a point.
Have you completely forgotten that the Fire Lord banished you?
Zuko doesn't want to listen and heads straight to the Fire Nation fleet. Oh, and remember Zhao? Well, it's his lucky day because he gets to catch both Aang and Zuko. Aang manages to fly through the fleet and Zhao allows Zuko to pass.
Why didn't Commander Zhao arrest me?
Because he wants to follow you. He knows you'll lead him to the prize you're both after.
The gang sneaks into the pagoda where they encounter a not-so-friendly group of fire sages. They make a run for it, but this one sage named Shu leads them through a secret passage to the sanctuary. Sadly, the doors are closed and only 5 simultaneous fire explosions can open it. But worry not, because Sokka has a trick up his sleeve.
It didn't work.
Okay, maybe you can worry a little. The explosion marks on the door make it seem like the Avatar has entered the sanctuary, which tricks the sages into opening the doors for them. Aang barely enters the door, which cannot be opened again until the solstice ends and he finally gets to talk to Roku. So, about that comet vision, you see, the comet appeared 100 years ago and made Firebenders the most powerful nation. Lord Sozin used this to start the war that went on for 100 years, and now the comet is returning by the end of the summer. Aang must defeat Lord Ozai before that time, because once the comet strikes, even he won't be capable of saving the world. In the meantime, Xiu and Zuko get captured by Zhao, who awaits for Aang to open the door. Roku has already warned Aang about the threat and even helps fend off the forces. The temple is destroyed. Zuko escapes and Aang continues his journey to master all 4 elements. They stop by a waterfall where Katara teaches Aang the basics of waterbending, and surprisingly, he learns all of them instantly. He even learns to make a big wave, which Katara herself can't do. She isn't too happy about that. Later, Katara finds a waterbending scroll, which she steals from the pirates, and the gang flies off using Aang's air glider. She can't make the bending work even with the scroll and screams at Aang for getting it right on the first try.
Oh my gosh, Aang. I am so sorry.
She sneaks out at night to practice again but gets abducted by Zuko and the pirates. Aang and Sokka get captured as well, and the fight breaks out between the 2 groups for the possession of the Avatar. The gang uses the chaos to escape, and Katara settles her differences with Aang.
Good one, Katara.
There is a storm coming. A big one.
Aang is having an early life crisis for disappearing when the world needed him most. The monks told him they knew he was the Avatar, and the only reason they told him so soon was because they sensed a war coming. All the fun in Aang's life was forced away by this discovery, and Gyatso was the only person who saw that he was still a child. Just as he was getting better, this happened.
You and Aang must be separated.
Aang was confused and afraid without his mentor and decided to run away with Appa, but then a storm approached and he fell into the ocean. The next thing he remembers is waking up next to Katara. Meanwhile, Iroh tells the crew Zuko's side of the story. Zuko was a young, ambitious kid who once challenged the general's decision in a war council. To settle this affair, he was paired to a duel against the general. Zuko did not once fear the consequences of fighting the general because his argument was just and fair. However, when he stepped into the arena, he learned that he was fighting the Fire Lord himself. You see, by speaking out of turn, he had disrespected the Lord, and now he had to fight his own father to prove his worth. He begged for forgiveness and refused to fight, which was deemed cowardly by Ozai, who banished him from the nation. His only hope is to capture the Avatar so his father accepts him again into the family. Commander Zhao is now promoted to the Admiral rank and takes these highly skilled Yuyan archers to capture the Avatar. Katara and Sokka caught a cold in a storm last night, and Aang goes out to look for some medicine.
All they need is some frozen wood frogs.
He is swarmed by the archers while looking for the frogs and is held captive at a highly secured fortress. You see, if they kill the Avatar, he will just be reborn into a different nation and they will have to look for him all over again. So their plan is to keep him alive just barely so he can't escape. Aang has no hopes of leaving this fortress, or does he?
Who are you? What's going on?
Their cover is blown, however, and the two have to fight their way out. After getting cornered, the Blue Spirit threatens to kill Aang, and since they want him alive, Zhao opens the gates to let them out. He doesn't plan to let them go entirely though. He uses the Yuyan archer to knock out the Blue Spirit, who happens to be none other than Prince Zuko. Aang rescues him to return the favor and hopes he can befriend him, but nope. After the siblings are cured, the group follows the trail of a battle between the fire and water tribes and learns that it was led by Katara and Sokka's father, Hakoda. At night, they run into an old friend Bato, who reveals that Hakoda is in the Eastern Kingdom with his fleet and takes them to an abbey for shelter. The siblings are enjoying the stay, but Aang feels left out from the beginning as he has nothing in common with them. Bato is awaiting a message which discloses the current location of Hakoda, but Aang gets a hold of it and hides it because he thinks they will leave him to see their father. I gotta say, not the brightest moment of Aang, but later though, he feels guilty and hands over the map the next day. The siblings decide they can't trust Aang anymore and head out without him. However, they have a change of heart soon and start looking for him. Meanwhile, Zuko hires a bounty hunter named June to help him track down Katara using the necklace he took earlier. The siblings are captured by June, but Aang returns to the Abbey and they all work together to fend off the intruders. And after Aang returns Katara's necklace, the group settles its differences and continues on their journey. Aang wants to learn some firebending, so the group heads to a fire festival in disguises. Let's try again. The group heads to a fire festival in disguises. Aang performs airbending in front of hundreds of people.
Hey, that kid's the Avatar!
The group is chased into a corner by the Fire Nation troops but escapes with the help of Appa. They meet this guy Che, who serves a guy named Zhong Zhong, a former Fire Nation general who doesn't work for Lord Ozai anymore. Aang sees this as an opportunity to learn some fire tricks, but Aang needs to master water and earth first. Zhong refuses to teach him at first, but Roku shows up and orders him to help Aang with the principles of firebending. Zhong teaches Aang how to concentrate and then shows him a basic technique, but Aang gets ahead of himself and ends up hurting Katara. Luckily, Katara learns that she has healing abilities, which is a rare skill amongst the people of Water Tribe. However, Aang takes an oath to never use firebending again as it can hurt the people he cares about. Katara uses her newly discovered ability to heal one of Aang's wounds that she got during training, and the group continues its journey forward. Sometime later, the group arrives at the Northern Water Tribe, a kingdom of frozen ice filled to the brim with waterbenders. A feast is held at the kingdom for not only the arrival of the kids, but also for the 16th birthday of Princess Yue. Sokka is totally having his love at first sight moment.
I think you're beautiful, and I never thought a girl like you would even notice a guy like me.
Sadly, he learns that Yue is engaged to someone else, and even though she likes him too, they can't be together. Aang, on the other hand, is assigned a mentor, Master Pakku. He introduces Pakku to Katara, but as it turns out, waterbending is forbidden for women in their tribe. Pakku says that women here only learn to heal, but Katara isn't settling for that.
At night, you can teach me whatever moves you learn from Master Pakku. That way, you have someone to practice with and I get to learn waterbending. Everyone's happy.
I'm not happy.
Pakku catches the two in the act and refuses to teach Aang, prompting Katara to challenge him to a duel. Surprisingly, she does pretty well against the old man and manages to impress him, even if only a little. Just then, he recognizes Katara's necklace, and it turns out he was the one who carved it for her grandmother. She belonged to the Northern Tribe and was supposed to marry Pakku but left for the South without saying a word to anyone. Pakku has a change of heart and is now mentoring both Katara and Aang, but in the meantime, Zhao is planning to launch a huge attack on the Northern Water Tribe. Also, he learns that Zuko was the Blue Spirit and pays the pirates to blow up his ship, but little does he know, Zuko survives and is now plotting revenge. The defenses are being prepared at the Water Tribe as the Fire Nation ships approach the northern borders. The battle begins, but Iroh suggests they hold off the attack because it's almost dawn and the waterbenders drive their strength from the ocean and the moon, but Zhao has a plan. Aang decides to meditate inside the temple to contact the spirit world, but Zuko, who has been planning a solo mission to abduct the Avatar, arrives just as Aang leaves his body. Katara tries to hold him off on her own and does pretty well for a rookie, mostly due to her powers being enhanced with the full moon, but still. As soon as the sun comes up, Zuko kicks her ass and abducts Aang. On a side note, the guy Yue is engaged to is Han, an arrogant warrior who doesn't value her as much as Sokka does. Let's just say the two don't get along with each other. Since the sun is up, the fire troops continue their siege again, and Zhao reveals his plan to kill the moon. During his youth, he came across a scroll that illustrated the mortal form of the ocean and the moon spirit, who gave up their immortality to become part of this world. In the meantime, Zuko has restrained Aang in a cave while Sokka, Katara, and Yue are in search of him. Aang has also learned the truth about the spirits, and after returning from the spirit world, he gets rescued by his friends. Katara gets her rematch and knocks out Zuko, but Aang takes him with them because he will die if they leave him out there.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Let's bring the guy who's constantly trying to kill us.
Zhao enters the temple and steals the moon spirit, which turns the moon red and the Water Tribe loses its ability to bend water. Aang tries to convince Zhao to not hurt the moon spirit, as it's not just the Water Tribe that needs the moon. In fact, all nations depend on the balance between the sun and the moon. This idiot, out of sheer ego, kills the moon spirit and the whole world turns dark. Iroh has had enough of this and showcases his skills, forcing Zhao to run away. The moon now is dead, but there is one last option, Yue. When Yue was born, she had little to no chance of surviving, but the moon spirit blessed her with some of its life force, and now it's time for her to return the favor and sadly part ways with Sokka. Meanwhile, the ocean spirit is mad and destroys Zhao's fleet. He also gets killed in the process and the war is concluded, at least for now. Pakku decides to head south to rebuild their sister tribe, and Ozai assigns his daughter to capture the Avatar. And with all these developments, Zuko decides to give up his chase of Aang and no longer seeks his father's approval. And on this note, our recap for today comes to an end. This legendary show has so much to teach us, whether you're an adult or a kid. If you enjoyed our recap, drop us a like and subscribe to Cartoon Mania to stay up to date with the continuation of this brilliant story and many more. With that said, we'll see you in the next one. Peace.